Stray Kids have sold out stadiums on 4 continents, racked up billions of streams, and self-produced nearly every track they release, a level of creative control almost unheard of in the K-pop industry. But what most fans don't see is what happens when the cameras shut off and the rehearsal rooms go dark. Between 2019 and 2023, several SKZ members quietly did things that set off alarm bells inside JYP Entertainment, not because of dating scandals or contract violations, but because of a woman who wasn't a girlfriend, wasn't a relative, and whose connection to the group puzzled even their own management. Anonymous gifts flagged during shipping, unscheduled visits caught on security footage, a suspicious bank transfer that triggered an internal audit. Each incident on its own looked like a potential PR crisis waiting to explode. Together, they painted a picture that JYP's executives simply couldn't ignore. But here's the twist. Every single one of these so-called infractions traces back to the same quiet truth, and when that truth finally came to light, it didn't end careers, it changed how the entire agency looked at its artists. So, who was this woman? Let's start from number 7. Number 7. A mysterious gift sent in secret. In the K-pop industry, almost nothing an idol does is truly private, and that includes something as simple as sending a package. Most fans understand, at least on a surface level, that idol life is heavily managed, but the depth of that management goes far beyond what's visible on variety shows and behind-the-scenes content. Under standard contracts at major agencies like JYP Entertainment, SM Entertainment, and HYBE, artists are typically required to report personal schedules, financial transactions above a certain threshold, and, yes, even personal deliveries. This isn't paranoia, it's risk management. In an industry where a single leaked address, a misinterpreted photo, or a rumor on a Naver forum can spiral into a full-blown scandal within hours, agencies treat every external interaction as a potential liability. JYP Entertainment, founded by Park Jin-young in 1997, has historically operated with what insiders describe as a character-first philosophy. Park Jin-young himself has spoken publicly, in interviews on shows like Healing Camp and Radio Star, about how he values personality and integrity in his artists just as much as talent. That philosophy trickles down into policy. JYP trainees and debuted artists alike operate under guidelines that govern public behavior, social media use, and personal communications. The goal isn't to control for the sake of control, it's to protect the artist and the brand simultaneously. So when a package flagged under an SKZ member's name showed up in JYP's internal logistics review, it immediately drew attention. Here's what reportedly happened. One of the Stray Kids members arranged to send a high-value gift, not merchandise, not a casual souvenir, but something with real monetary and sentimental weight, to an address that didn't match any name in the agency's approved contacts list. In K-pop management, agencies typically maintain a file of an artist's known associates, immediate family members, verified close friends, and approved professional contacts. Any delivery or correspondence going to someone outside that circle raises a flag. It's not automatically treated as a scandal, but it does trigger a question. And that's exactly what happened. JYP's management staff intercepted the shipment, not in a dramatic movie-style seizure, but through the routine screening process that applies to outgoing and incoming mail and packages linked to their artists. When the recipient's name didn't match anyone in the member's file, the logistics team escalated it to artist management. Now, to understand why this mattered so much, you need to understand the broader context of idol fan and idol public boundaries in South Korea. The Korean entertainment industry has dealt with countless cases where personal deliveries became public knowledge and sparked dating rumors, stalking concerns, or sosang, or obsessive fan, incidents. In 2019 alone, multiple K-pop idols across different agencies had their private addresses or delivery records leaked through third-party courier employees or warehouse staff. Agencies learned the hard way that even a simple package can become ammunition in the wrong hands. For Stray Kids specifically, the stakes were even higher. By the time this incident reportedly occurred, the group had already established themselves as one of the fourth generation's most prominent acts. Their debut on the 2017 Mnet survival show Stray Kids, where the group was formed under Park Jin-young's direct mentorship, had given them a massive initial platform. Their 2018 debut with District 9 and subsequent releases like God's Menu in 2020 and Maniac in 2022 had catapulted them into international stardom. They were selling out arenas, topping Billboard charts, and representing JYP Entertainment on a global stage. Any potential controversy attached to a member could ripple across the entire group's reputation. So when the management team sat the member down and asked, "Who is this person and why are you sending them a gift outside of protocol?" it wasn't a casual conversation, it was a formal inquiry. The member's response, according to those familiar with the situation, was calm but guarded. He explained that the recipient was someone important to him, someone who had played a meaningful role in his life, but he didn't immediately reveal the full nature of the relationship. This, understandably, didn't fully satisfy management. In an industry where ambiguity is the enemy of crisis prevention, a vague answer to a direct question only deepens concern. What made this situation particularly unusual was the nature of the gift itself. It wasn't a casual item, a book, a snack box, or a piece of clothing. It carried weight, both in value and in intention. The kind of gift you send to someone you genuinely want to honor, not just acknowledge. That level of thoughtfulness, paradoxically, is what made it more suspicious in the eyes of management. A casual gift to a friend wouldn't raise alarms. A deeply personal, carefully chosen, expensive gift to an unidentified woman, that checks several boxes on an agency's risk assessment list. JYP didn't leak the incident. There was no public statement, no media briefing, no dispatch article. Internally, however, it was logged. The member was reminded of the agency's communication and delivery protocols, and the matter was placed on a watch list, meaning any further unusual activity involving the same recipient or similar patterns would be scrutinized more closely. What's important to note here is what didn't happen. The member wasn't punished. He wasn't publicly reprimanded. He wasn't threatened with contract consequences. JYP's handling of the situation, at this stage, was measured, a reflection of the agency's reputation for being one of the more artist-friendly Big Four companies. But measured doesn't mean unconcerned. The flag had been raised, and from this point forward, management was paying closer attention. The member, meanwhile, didn't stop. Whatever his reason for sending that gift, it clearly mattered enough to him that a conversation with management wasn't going to shut it down. He'd just have to be more careful next time. And as it turns out, there would be a next time, because this was only the beginning. What the member did on his very next day off would set off an entirely different kind of alarm inside JYP, and this time there would be camera footage to go along with it. Number 6. A secret visit on a day off. Days off in K-pop are rare, and when they happen, they're almost never truly off. To appreciate what happened next, you first need to understand how brutally packed a top-tier idol group's schedule actually is. Stray Kids, like most groups operating at their level, maintain a workload that would be considered extreme by almost any professional standard. A typical active period, known in the industry as a comeback cycle, involves weeks of synchronized preparation, recording and mixing tracks, shooting music videos, rehearsing choreography for hours daily, filming variety content, attending pre-promotional press junkets, and then launching into the promotional cycle itself. That cycle means back-to-back appearances on music shows like M Countdown, Music Bank, Inkigayo, and Show Music Core, often performing 2 or 3 times in a single week, each with separate pre-recordings, rehearsals, and waiting periods that can stretch a single broadcast day to 14 or 15 hours. Between comeback cycles, there are concert tours, fan meetings, brand endorsements, individual schedules like acting roles, solo releases, or variety show appearances, and the ever-present demand for content creation. Stray Kids are especially prolific in this regard. Their self-produced content library, including their SKZ Record, SKZ Player, and SKZ Log series on YouTube, means the members are frequently writing, recording, and filming even during periods that might look quiet from the outside. So when a member actually gets a full day off, no schedule, no filming, no studio time, it's a genuinely scarce resource. Most members use that time to do exactly what you'd expect: sleep, visit family, eat a home-cooked meal, or simply exist without a camera pointed at them. JYP Entertainment, like most major agencies, doesn't technically prohibit members from going out on their days off, but there's a strong expectation and, in many cases, a contractual requirement that artists report their general whereabouts. This isn't unique to JYP, it's standard practice across the Big Four agencies and most mid-tier companies as well. The logic is straightforward. If a scandal breaks, if a Sasaeng incident occurs, or if an emergency schedule is added, the agency needs to know where its artists are. That's why when CCTV footage surfaced internally showing one of the SKZ members at an unscheduled location on his day off, management didn't shrug it off. The footage reportedly came from a routine security review, not because anyone was actively surveilling the member, but because agencies periodically check security feeds from building entrances, parking garages, and nearby commercial areas as part of their standard safety protocols. Sasaeng culture in South Korea is a well-documented and persistent problem. Fans with obsessive tendencies have been known to track idols' vehicles, install GPS devices, infiltrate private schedules, and even break into dormitories. JYP has dealt with this directly. In 2020, the agency publicly announced legal action against Sasaeng fans targeting multiple artists, including Stray Kids, for invasion of privacy and persistent stalking behavior. So security footage isn't reviewed out of distrust towards the artists, it's reviewed to protect them. But what the footage showed this time wasn't a security threat. It was the member, alone, arriving at a location that wasn't his family home, a known friend's residence, or any JYP-affiliated facility. And he was meeting someone, a woman. In the K-pop industry, the phrase "meeting a woman" carries a specific and immediate connotation regardless of the actual context. Dating scandals are among the most damaging events that can hit an active idol group, particularly one with a large and emotionally invested fanbase. Stray Kids fandom, Stay, numbered in tens of millions globally by this point, with a particularly passionate core base in South Korea, Japan, and Southeast Asia. The economic implications of a dating rumor, reduced album sales, brand deal cancellations, fandom fractures are not hypothetical, they're documented. Multiple K-pop artists across generations have seen measurable career impacts from confirmed or even rumored relationships. JYP has historically taken a more nuanced stance on dating compared to some of its competitors. Park Jin-young has stated publicly that he doesn't impose a blanket dating ban on his artists, a position he reiterated during interviews around 2015 and again in later years. However, not banning dating is very different from being comfortable with it. The unspoken rule, widely understood across the industry, is that discretion is everything. If a relationship relationship exists, it must be invisible, and more critically, it must be disclosed to management in advance, so the agency can prepare contingency plans in case of a leak. This member had disclosed nothing, no mention of a personal meeting, no request to adjust his reported itinerary. As far as JYP's management team knew, he was supposed to be resting at home or visiting family. The call-in that followed was more serious than the conversation about the gift. This time, the questions weren't just about who the woman was, they were about why the member had chosen to keep the meeting unreported. In agency terms, the issue wasn't necessarily the visit itself, it was the lack of transparency. An idol who conceals a personal meeting from management introduces an unknown variable into the agency's risk equation, and unknown variables, in an industry built on carefully managed public perception, are treated as threats until proven otherwise. The member once again provided an explanation, but reportedly stopped short of revealing the full picture. He acknowledged the meeting, confirmed the woman's existence in his life, and assured management that it was not a romantic relationship, but he didn't elaborate on who she was or why she mattered to him enough to risk a protocol violation on one of his few days of rest. This put JYP in a difficult position. On one hand, the member had a clean track record, no prior disciplinary issues, no public controversies, no behavioral red flags. Stray Kids as a group had been remarkably scandal-free compared to many of their peers, a fact that reflected well on both the members and the agency's management. On the other hand, this was now the second incident involving the same pattern, an SKZ member connecting with an unidentified woman outside approved channels. Management decided not to escalate yet, but the internal file on this member grew thicker, and the unspoken message was clear. One more unexplained incident, and the conversation would shift from questions to consequences. What management didn't know was that the evidence trail was about to get far more complicated, because the next discovery wouldn't come from a package or a security camera. It would come from the music itself, hidden in plain sight inside the very songs that millions of fans were streaming every day.
Number 5. A song that was actually written for someone. Stray Kids don't just perform their music, they build it from the ground up, and that's exactly what made this discovery so significant. Unlike many idol groups who receive songs from external producers and songwriting teams, Stray Kids operate with an unusual degree of creative autonomy. At the center of their production process is 3RACHA, the in-house producing unit composed of Bangchan, Changbin, and Han. These three members write, compose, arrange, and co-produce the vast majority of Stray Kids' discography. Bangchan, who trained at JYP Entertainment for approximately 7 years before debuting, has been credited on over 100 registered songs with the Korea Music Copyright Association, KOMCA. Changbin and Han hold similarly extensive credits. This isn't a token involvement where an idol contributes a line or two and receives a courtesy writing credit. 3RACHA are genuine architects of the group's sonic identity. This level of creative control is a double-edged sword. On one side, it gives Stray Kids an artistic authenticity that resonates deeply with their fanbase. Stay don't just consume the music, they dissect it, annotate it, and study it with a level of attention that rivals academic textual analysis. Fan accounts on platforms like Twitter, Tumblr, and dedicated Korean fan forums routinely break down lyrics syllable by syllable, cross-referencing Korean wordplay, English double meanings, and potential autobiographical references. It's a participatory culture where every metaphor is a clue and every vocal inflection is potential evidence of something deeper. On the other side, that creative freedom means the members' personal emotions, experiences, and relationships are embedded directly into commercially released products that carry JYP Entertainment's brand and are subject to the agency's quality control and image management processes. This tension is what made a particular fan discovery so explosive.
The analysis started, as many K-pop deep dives do, on fan community platforms. A group of Korean-speaking Stay began dissecting the lyrics of a specific track, one that had been well received commercially but hadn't initially attracted unusual attention for its lyrical content. The song's surface-level reading suggested familiar thematic territory: struggle, perseverance, gratitude, emotional resilience. Standard Stray Kids fare. The group's discography is built on these themes. Albums like I Am Not, I Am Who, I Am You, and the No Easy era all explored identity, defiance, and self-determination with remarkable consistency. But as fans dug deeper, they noticed something that didn't quite fit the usual framework. Certain lines contained references that were oddly specific, not the kind of universal metaphors that apply to a broad audience, but intimate details that pointed towards a single, identifiable person. The pronoun usage, the situational descriptions, the emotional register, they collectively suggested that the song wasn't an anthem for Stay, wasn't a letter to a family member, and wasn't an abstract meditation on fame. It was written for someone specific, a woman. Korean fans who had the advantage of parsing the original language without the filter of translation were the first to flag this. They noted grammatical structures and vocabulary choices that, in Korean, carry gendered or relational implications that don't always survive translation into English. A particular honorific nuance here, a specific verb ending there, small linguistic markers that to a fluent speaker narrowed the possible interpretations considerably. The theory gained traction quickly. Fan translation accounts picked it up and brought it to the international fandom. Within days, the analysis had been viewed hundreds of thousands of times across multiple platforms, and the consensus, while not unanimous, was striking in its confidence. This song was a personal tribute, written by a member for a woman who had profoundly shaped his life, and it wasn't his mother. When this fan analysis reached enough visibility, it inevitably landed on JYP Entertainment's radar. Agencies actively monitor fan discourse, not casually, but systematically. Major K-pop companies employ dedicated teams, sometimes supplemented by external PR monitoring firms, that track social media sentiment, trending topics, and emerging narratives around their artists in real time. This isn't an industry secret, it's a known operational practice. When a fan theory about a hidden personal message in an officially released track starts trending, the agency knows about it within hours. JYP's concern wasn't that the song existed. All Stray Kids releases go through an internal review process before publication. Lyrics are reviewed, melodies are approved, and the overall thematic direction is assessed for alignment with the group's brand identity and the agency's standards. The song had cleared all of those checkpoints. The problem was that the fan interpretation, which may or may not have been the members' conscious intention, introduced a narrative that management hadn't anticipated and hadn't prepared for. In the K-pop image economy, ambiguity is a carefully managed asset. Songs are often written to feel deeply personal while remaining open to interpretation, allowing each fan to project their own meaning onto the lyrics. It's a core mechanic of parasocial connection. The listener feels the song was written for them, or about a shared experience. When a specific, identifiable muse enters the equation, that mechanic breaks. The song is no longer everyone's, it belongs to someone, and that shift, however subtle, can alter the emotional contract between artist and fan. Management reportedly raised the issue with the member, not as a disciplinary matter, but as a strategic conversation. The questions centered on intent and awareness. Did you deliberately encode a personal message? Were you aware that fans might identify a specific subject? And most pointedly, is this connected to the same woman from The Gift and The Visit? The member's response, according to those with knowledge of the conversation, was honest but measured. He acknowledged that the song drew from personal experience, as most of his writing does, but maintained that the creative process is organic and not every lyric is a coded message. Whether management found that fully convincing is unclear. What is clear is that the conversation added another layer to an already growing internal file. 3 incidents. the same pattern, an unidentified woman exerting a gravitational pull strong enough to influence an idol's actions, movements, and now his art. For JYP, the question was no longer just about protocol compliance. It was about understanding the depth of a connection that their own artist was unwilling to fully explain. And then the financial records arrived on management's desk, and the numbers told a story that words alone never could.
Number 4. A suspicious wire transfer. Money in the K-pop industry doesn't move quietly, especially when it belongs to an artist under contract. To understand why a single wire transfer triggered a full internal investigation at JYP Entertainment, you need to understand how idol finances actually work behind the scenes. It's a system that most fans never think about, and for good reason, agencies don't advertise the mechanics. But the structure is well documented through contract disputes, court cases, and testimonies from former idols who've spoken publicly about their experiences. When a K-pop idol debuts under a major agency, the financial relationship is governed by an exclusive contract, typically lasting 7 years. In accordance with South Korea's Fair Trade Commission guidelines established in 2009 after widespread criticism of exploitative contract terms in the industry's earlier decades. Under these contracts, the agency covers the costs of training, production, housing, styling, promotion, and management. In return, the agency takes a percentage of the artist's earnings, a split that varies by company and by the artist's seniority but historically ranges from a 5-to-5 to 2-to-8 ratio in the early years, gradually shifting in the artist's favor as they generate more revenue. For Stray Kids, the financial picture by the time of this incident was substantial. The group's commercial trajectory had been steep. Their 2022 album Maxcidental debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200, making Stray Kids only the third K-pop act in history to achieve that milestone at the time. Their world tours were selling out arenas across North America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. Brand endorsements with companies like Samsung, Pacific, and Felix's high-profile ambassadorship with Louis Vuitton added significant individual income streams. By conservative industry estimates, the members were each earning well into the hundreds of millions of Korean won annually, figures that, while impressive, also meant that their financial activity carried proportionally greater scrutiny. Under most major agency contracts, artists' earnings are processed through the agency's financial infrastructure before being distributed to the individual. This means the agency has visibility, either directly or through its financial management partners, into the artist's income flow. Personal spending, in theory, is private. But in practice, agencies often maintain advisory oversight of their artists' finances, particularly for younger idols who may not have experience managing large sums. This isn't legally mandated, but it's culturally normalized within the industry, and many artists accept it as part of the management relationship. So when JYP's financial oversight flagged a significant outgoing transfer from an SKZ member's personal account, it wasn't because someone was snooping through bank statements for sport. It was because the transfer met internal thresholds either in amount, frequency, or recipient profile that triggered a routine review. The initial assumption within management was benign. Family support is one of the most common and culturally expected uses of an idol's personal earnings. In Korean culture, filial piety, the deep-rooted Confucian value of supporting and honoring one's parents, is not just a moral expectation but a social norm that permeates every level of society. It is extremely common for successful young entertainers to purchase apartments for their parents, fund siblings' education, or cover family medical expenses. Several Stray Kids members have spoken openly about their desire to support their families. Bang Chan has mentioned his family in Australia. Felix has spoken emotionally about his parents' sacrifices during his training period in Seoul, thousands of kilometers from his home in Sydney. These are well-known, publicly documented sentiments. Management likely expected the transfer to trace back to a family member's account, a parent, a sibling, a relative. A routine check, a confirmed recipient, and the file would close. But the recipient wasn't family. When the financial team cross-referenced the account holder's name against the member's known associates file, the same registry that had flagged the earlier gift and the unscheduled visit, the name didn't match. It wasn't a parent. It wasn't a sibling. It wasn't a cousin, aunt, or any registered family contact. It was a woman, and her identity was, to the financial team at least, unknown. This escalated the matter from a routine flag to a formal internal investigation. The distinction matters. A routine flag is a question: can you confirm this transaction? A formal investigation involves documentation, senior management notification, and in some cases, consultation with the agency's legal team. The reason is straightforward. Under Korean entertainment law and standard contract provisions, an artist's financial behavior can have direct implications for the agency's liability. If funds are being transferred under duress, if a third party is exerting financial influence over an artist, or if the transaction could be construed as evidence of an undisclosed personal relationship that might damage the group's public image, each of these scenarios carries legal and commercial consequences that the agency is obligated to assess. JYP's investigation reportedly involved a direct conversation with the member, during which he was asked to explain the nature of the transfer, his relationship with the recipient, and whether this was a one-time transaction or part of a pattern. The member, consistent with his behavior during the previous incidents, confirmed that the transfer was voluntary, that the recipient was someone important to him, and that the relationship was not romantic. But once again, he declined to provide the full context. For management, this was now a pattern that could no longer be treated as a series of isolated incidents. A gift to an unidentified woman. A secret visit to the same woman. A song potentially written about her. And now, a significant financial transfer to her account. For data points, all converging on a single unnamed figure who appeared to hold extraordinary influence over one of their most valuable artists. The agency didn't go public. They didn't leak. They didn't take punitive action, at least not yet. But internally, the member's file was now thick enough to warrant ongoing monitoring, and the unresolved question at the center of it all, who is this woman, and what is her hold on him, was growing louder with every incident. And then, the fifth incident nearly blew the entire situation wide open, not through internal channels, but through the one force that no agency can fully control, the internet. A photograph was about to surface, and JYP's PR team would have only hours to stop it. Number 3, a photo that almost leaked to the public. In the K-pop industry, a single photograph can end a career in an afternoon. That's not an exaggeration, it's a documented reality. The history of K-pop is littered with moments where a leaked image fundamentally altered the trajectory of an artist's public life. Dispatch, South Korea's most notorious entertainment media outlet, has built its entire brand around this principle. Every year, traditionally on January 1st, Dispatch reveals a celebrity couple, complete with photographic evidence gathered through weeks or months of surveillance. The outlet's track record includes confirming relationships involving some of the biggest names in Korean entertainment, from EXO's Kai and Blackpink's Jennie to Hyuna and Dawn. The impact of these reveals varies, but the mechanism is always the same. A photograph provides undeniable visual evidence, and the court of public opinion renders its verdict within hours. But Dispatch isn't the only threat. The rise of social media, smartphone cameras, and the sheer density of South Korea's urban environment means that idols are perpetually one bystander photo away from a crisis. Fan-taken photos, known as fan-site images when captured by dedicated fan photographers, circulate at extraordinary speed. A blurry image taken through a car window can reach 1 million views on Twitter before the idol even arrives at their destination. In this ecosystem, privacy isn't just difficult, it's functionally non-existent for anyone operating at Stray Kids' level of fame. So when JYP Entertainment's internal communications team became aware that a private photograph of an SKZ member with an unidentified woman was circulating in pre-leak channels, the response was immediate and aggressive. The term pre-leak channels refers to the informal networks, group chats, private forums, encrypted messaging threads, where sensitive content often surfaces before hitting mainstream platforms. These channels exist in a gray zone between private gossip and public media. Content shared in these spaces doesn't always make it to the public eye, but when it does, the transition from private to viral can happen in minutes. K-pop agencies, acutely aware of these networks, maintain monitoring systems, both technological and human, designed to detect potential leaks before they breach containment. The photo in question reportedly showed the SKZ member in close physical proximity to a woman. Not in a public setting with the plausible distance of a professional interaction or a chance encounter, but in a context that conveyed familiarity, comfort, and personal connection. The woman was not wearing a staff lanyard. She was not identifiable as a known family member. And the setting was clearly private, not a concert venue, not a broadcast station, not a fan meeting. For JYP's PR team, the calculus was immediate. If this image reached Dispatch, Koreaboo, Okpop, Panchoa, or any of the major K-pop aggregation platforms, the narrative would write itself within seconds. SKZ member in secret relationship. And once that narrative took hold, no amount of clarification, context, or denial would fully erase it from the public consciousness. In the parasocial economy of K-pop fandom, the perception of romantic involvement can be as damaging as confirmed romantic involvement, sometimes more so, because ambiguity fuels speculation, and speculation is uncontrollable. The PR team executed what industry professionals refer to as a containment protocol. The specifics of how agencies suppress pre-leak content are not widely publicized, for obvious reasons, but the general framework is well understood within the industry. It typically involves a combination of direct outreach to the source, requesting or demanding removal of the content, legal pressure through cease and desist communications citing privacy and portrait rights under South Korean law, and, in some cases, coordinated reporting on social media platforms to trigger automated content removal before human moderators even review the material. South Korea's Personal Information Protection Act and the country's robust defamation laws, which, notably, apply even when the disseminated information is true, give agencies significant legal leverage in these situations. JYP's team reportedly succeeded in preventing the photograph from reaching mainstream circulation. The image was scrubbed from the channels where it had initially appeared, and no major media outlet ran the story. From a crisis management perspective, it was a clean operation. The public never saw the photo. No trending hashtags materialized. No fandom meltdown occurred. But internally, the incident detonated. This was no longer a pattern that could be managed through individual conversations and quiet file entries. A near-public leak meant that the member's connection to this woman had created a tangible, measurable risk to the group's public standing, a risk that JYP had been forced to expend real resources to neutralize. And the fact that the photo existed at all raised uncomfortable questions about how it had been taken, who had access to it, and whether additional images or recordings might be circulating in channels the agency hadn't yet identified. The consequences were felt beyond the individual member. Following this incident, JYP reportedly tightened its internal regulations around phone usage and social media activity for all Stray Kids members. This wasn't unprecedented. Agencies routinely update their digital policies in response to specific incidents. After several high-profile K-pop data breaches and phone hacking scandals in previous years, many companies had already implemented restrictions on cloud storage, photo sharing apps, and unsecured messaging platforms. JYP's updated guidelines reportedly included stricter protocols around personal photography in non-public settings and enhanced review procedures for any images stored on members' personal devices during scheduled activities. For the members who had nothing to do with the incident, these new restrictions were an unwelcome consequence of someone else's situation. For the member at the center of it all, the tightened rules sent an unmistakable signal. The agency's patience was wearing thin, and the margin for further incidents was narrowing to almost nothing. 5 data points now. A gift, a visit, a song, a financial transfer, and a photograph, each one independently manageable, but collectively forming a constellation that pointed towards something JYP couldn't yet name and the member wouldn't yet explain. And then came the moment that pushed the tension to its absolute breaking point, when the member did something that, in the rigid hierarchy of the K-pop industry, is considered almost unforgivable. He turned down a schedule. And the reason was her. Number 2, sacrificing a career opportunity for a single request. In the K-pop industry, you don't say no to a schedule. You just don't. This is one of those unwritten rules that functions with the force of law, not because it's written into contracts in explicit terms, though contractual obligations around scheduling compliance certainly exist, but because the entire ecosystem is built on the assumption that artists show up. Every time, on time, no exceptions. The machinery behind a single promotional appearance, the producers who booked the studio, the stylists who prepared the wardrobe, the choreographers who adjusted the formations, the camera operators who planned the shots, the advertisers who purchased time slots based on confirmed lineups, involves dozens of professionals and, in many cases, significant financial commitments that are locked in weeks or months in advance. When an idol cancels or refuses a schedule, the ripple effects are immediate and measurable. The financial penalty for a no-show or last-minute withdrawal from a broadcast appearance can run into tens of millions of Korean won. Brand partnerships, which often include contractual guarantees of availability for specific events, can be jeopardized. And within the agency itself, a refusal is treated not just as a logistical problem but as a signal that the artist's priorities may no longer be fully aligned with the group's collective mission. In the 27-year history of JYP Entertainment, the agency has managed some of the most disciplined and professionally consistent acts in the industry. From G.O to Wonder Girls to 2PM to GOT7 to Twice, JYP's roster has been defined by reliability as much as by talent. Park Jin-young's oft-repeated philosophy, character over skill, isn't just a motivational slogan. It manifests in a management culture where professionalism is treated as a non-negotiable baseline. You can be less talented than the trainee next to you and still debut if your work ethic and character are stronger. But you cannot be unreliable. Unreliability, in Park Jin-young's system, is the one trait that talent cannot compensate for. So when one of the Stray Kids members reportedly declined an important promotional schedule, not a casual fan event or an optional appearance, but a schedule with real commercial and strategic weight, the internal response was severe. The details of the specific schedule have not been publicly confirmed, but the context matters. Stray Kids' promotional activities during their peak years included appearances that carried implications far beyond a single broadcast. A music show performance during a comeback week affects chart positioning, which influences streaming algorithms, which drives album sales, which determines year-end award eligibility. A brand event appearance fulfills contractual obligations that directly impact the group's endorsement income. A variety show recording can shift public perception of a member's individual brand, opening or closing doors for future solo opportunities. None of these are trivial, and all of them operate on tightly coordinated timelines where one absence creates a domino effect of complications. The member reportedly informed management that he was unable to attend the schedule due to a personal commitment. Not a medical issue. Agencies have well-established protocols for health-related absences, and the K-pop industry, despite its demanding culture, has become increasingly responsive to physical and mental health needs, particularly after several high-profile cases brought the issue into public discourse. This was different. The member was physically capable of attending. He was choosing not to. When pressed for an explanation, the member revealed that the same woman connected to every previous incident, had made a personal request of him. Not a demand, not an ultimatum, but a request. And it was important enough to him that he was willing to accept the professional consequences of prioritizing it over his obligations to the group and the agency. This was, by the standards of K-pop management culture, a crisis-level decision. Not because the schedule couldn't be restructured. Agencies adapt to member absences regularly, adjusting formations, redistributing lines, and reworking camera plans. Stray Kids, with 8 active members following Woojin's departure in October 2019, had enough personnel depth to cover a single absence without canceling an appearance outright. The crisis wasn't logistical. It was philosophical. An idol who chooses a personal commitment over a professional one is, in the eyes of agency management, making a statement about where his loyalty lies. And in a system where the group is the unit, where collective success is the organizing principle, and where every member's individual behavior reflects on the other 7, that statement reverberates far beyond the individual. JYP's management team reportedly held an extended meeting following the incident. The conversation went beyond the immediate scheduling conflict and into broader questions about the members' trajectory and state of mind. Was this an isolated lapse in judgment, or was it evidence of a deeper shift in priorities? Was the member's connection to this woman compromising his ability to fulfill his role within the group? And most critically, at what point does an artist's personal life become an agency's professional problem? The member was not terminated. He was not suspended. Stray Kids' position as one of JYP's highest revenue-generating acts gave the member a degree of leverage that a less commercially successful idol might not have had. But the conversation was, by all accounts, the most serious disciplinary interaction of his career. He was reminded of his contractual obligations, informed of the financial and reputational costs his absence had generated, and told, in terms that left little room for interpretation, that a repeat incident would trigger formal contractual review. What struck the management team most, however, wasn't the defiance itself. It was the member's demeanor. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't dismissive. He wasn't acting out of impulse or rebellion. He was calm, deliberate, and visibly at peace with his decision, as if the weight of what he might lose professionally was already measured against the weight of what he would lose personally, and the calculation had been made long before the conversation began. That kind of quiet conviction unnerved management more than any outburst could have. Because it meant this wasn't going to stop. Whatever this woman meant to this member, it was foundational, woven into the architecture of who he was. And so JYP made a decision of its own. It was time to find out, once and for all, who this woman was. The answer, when it finally arrived, would rewrite every assumption management had made, and turn 6 incidents of suspicion into one of the most quietly powerful stories in the group's history. Number 1. The woman's identity is finally revealed. 6 incidents. Months of internal tension. A growing file of unanswered questions. And at the center of it all, a single unnamed woman whose invisible presence had shaken the operational machinery of one of South Korea's largest entertainment companies. JYP Entertainment had reached its threshold. The pattern was too consistent, the stakes too high, and the member's repeated refusal to provide full transparency had exhausted the goodwill that his otherwise spotless professional record had earned. Management made the decision to pursue a definitive answer, not through surveillance or coercion, but through a direct, formal sit-down in which the member would be asked, plainly and without ambiguity, to identify the woman and explain the full scope of their relationship. What happened in that room reportedly changed the tone of the entire conversation within the first few minutes. The woman was not a girlfriend. She was not a romantic interest, a secret partner, or anything resembling the scandal that management had spent months preparing to contain. She was a teacher, a mentor figure who had been part of the member's life long before he ever set foot inside JYP Entertainment's training facilities. A woman who had recognized something in him during his formative years and had invested her time, her energy, and her belief in him during a period when his path to becoming an idol was anything but guaranteed. To understand the weight of this revelation, you need to understand the role that teachers and mentors occupy in Korean culture. South Korea's social framework is built on Confucian principles that have shaped interpersonal relationships for centuries. Among these principles, the bond between teacher and student, SAJEG-gon, holds a place of profound cultural significance. A teacher in Korean society is not merely an instructor who delivers information. A teacher is a life shaper, a moral guide, and in many cases, a surrogate parental figure whose influence extends far beyond the classroom. The Korean language itself reflects this hierarchy. The word sien sengnam, used to address a teacher, carries a level of respect comparable to how one addresses an elder family member. Teachers' Day, celebrated on May 15 in South Korea, is a nationally recognized occasion where students of all ages express formal gratitude to their educators, a tradition that dates back to 1963. For the member in question, this woman had been the person who first encouraged his artistic instincts. Before the auditions, before the trainee years, before the survival show cameras and the debut stage and the Billboard charts, there was a period in his life when none of that existed, and the only person telling him that his dreams were worth pursuing was her. She had provided mentorship during a critical developmental window, the years when a young person's sense of identity and self-worth are most malleable and most vulnerable. In a culture where academic achievement is the dominant measure of a young person's value, choosing to pursue a career in entertainment is a gamble that many families and educators actively discourage. This woman had done the opposite. She had affirmed his potential when affirmation was scarce. The gift, the one intercepted during the shipping process, was a gesture of gratitude. Something carefully chosen to reflect the depth of what she had given him, sent anonymously because the member didn't want the act to become public, didn't want it to be perceived as performative generosity or leveraged for media attention. He wanted it to arrive quietly, as a private acknowledgement between two people who shared a history that predated his fame. The visit on his day off, the one captured on CCTV, was exactly what it appeared to be, a young man using his only free time to see someone who mattered to him. Not because she asked, but because he understood that time is the most honest currency of gratitude, and that showing up in person carries a meaning that no gift or phone call can replicate. The song, the one fans had dissected and debated across platforms, was his way of encoding her influence into his art. A permanent record, hidden in plain sight within Stray Kids' discography, that the person who shaped him would exist in the music long after the promotional cycle ended and the streaming numbers stabilized. The financial transfer was direct support. A tangible investment in the well-being of a woman who had invested intangibly in his when he had nothing to offer in return. In Korean culture, reciprocating a teacher's generosity with material support when one has the means to do so is not just acceptable, it is an act of moral integrity. It is the completion of a cycle that Korean society considers fundamental to the social contract. The photograph, the one that nearly leaked and sent JYP's PR team into crisis mode, was a simple personal moment captured between two people whose bond was built on years of trust. Not a scandal. Not evidence of anything illicit. Just a record of genuine human connection. And the schedule he turned down, the one that nearly cost him his standing within the agency, was sacrificed to honor a request from the woman who had given him something no schedule, no paycheck, and no chart position could replace: the belief that he could become who he is. When the full story landed, the atmosphere inside that room shifted. The file, months of flags, inquiries, and escalating concern, suddenly read differently. Every line item that had looked like a risk now looked like devotion. Every protocol violation was reframed as an act of loyalty so deeply rooted in cultural values that punishing it would have been not just inappropriate, but morally incoherent. JYP's management, to their credit, recognized this. Park Jin-young's character-first philosophy, the same principle that governs trainee selection, contract management, and artist development, was now being reflected back at the agency by one of its own artists, in the most personal and unscripted way possible. The member hadn't violated the spirit of anything JYP stood for. He had embodied it. The file was closed. No disciplinary action was taken. And within the agency, the story reportedly became something of a quiet legend, a reminder that behind every data point, every flagged transaction, and every security footage timestamp, there is a human story that spreadsheets and protocols can never fully capture. Stray Kids kept performing. The member kept writing. And somewhere, outside the orbit of stages and contracts and comeback schedules, A woman who once told a young boy that his dreams were worth chasing now had all the proof she would ever need that he had been listening. And there it is, 7 moments that looked like infractions on paper but turned out to be something the K-pop industry rarely lets us see, an idol being unapologetically human. We started this story with a mystery. A package intercepted by management. A visit caught on camera. A song decoded by fans. A wire transfer flagged by accountants. A photograph nearly weaponized by the internet. A career opportunity sacrificed without hesitation. And at the end of it all, a revelation so simple and so fundamentally decent that it made every alarm bell, every internal investigation, and every tense meeting inside JYP Entertainment feel almost absurd in hindsight. This wasn't a scandal. It was gratitude, expressed in 6 different forms by a young man who never forgot where his journey truly began. What makes this story worth telling isn't just the emotional resolution. It's what it reveals about the system these artists operate within. The K-pop industry is, by design, a machine of precision. Every smile is timed, every outfit is approved, every public word is weighed against its potential impact on brand perception and market value. This system has produced some of the most polished, globally successful entertainment acts in modern history. Stray Kids themselves are proof of what that system can achieve, a self-producing group that writes its own music, choreographs its own performances, and commands audiences across every continent. The machine works. But machines don't account for the parts of a person that exist outside the schedule. They don't have a column in the spreadsheet for the teacher who believed in you when you were 14. They don't have a protocol for the kind of debt that can't be measured in one or settled with a contract clause. And when a human being operating inside that machine decides to honor something older and deeper than his professional obligations, the machine doesn't know what to do with it, so it flags it, investigates it, and treats it as a threat until someone finally asks the right question. JYP asked the right question. And the answer didn't just resolve 6 months of internal tension, it reinforced something that Park Jin-young has been saying since he founded the company in 1997. Character matters. Not as a branding strategy. Not as a trainee selection criterion. But as the thing that remains when the cameras are off, the earnings are distributed, and the only audience is the person staring back at you in the mirror. The member at the center of this story didn't do what he did for content. He didn't do it for a storyline or a redemption arc or a viral moment. He did it because a woman changed his life, and he decided, quietly, persistently, and at genuine personal risk, that he was going to acknowledge that debt in every way available to him. With his resources. With his time. With his art. With his presence. And when the cost of that acknowledgement collided with the expectations of his career, he chose the person over the schedule without a moment of visible hesitation. That's not something you can train into an idol. That's not something a survival show can manufacture or a management strategy can engineer. That is character, the real kind, the kind that only becomes visible when honoring it comes at a cost. Stray Kids have accomplished extraordinary things as a group. Multiple #1 albums. Record-breaking tours. A level of creative autonomy that most idol groups will never experience. But if you strip away the accolades, the numbers, and the industry infrastructure, what you find underneath is 8 individuals who carry their own private histories, their own debts of gratitude, and their own definitions of loyalty. And sometimes, those private commitments collide with the public machinery, and when they do, the result is a story that no scriptwriter could have planned and no PR team could have packaged. This was one of those stories. And now you know it. If this is the kind of content that makes you think, makes you feel, and reminds you that there's always more happening behind the surface than what the algorithm shows you, then you already know what to do. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. And tap the notification bell so you're here when the next story drops. We'll see you in the next one.